What's up, everybody? This is Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, HawgSports.com. Week 2 is finally here. Arkansas traveling to Mississippi State for a game that, going into it, you kind of thought that Arkansas might really have a good chance. And I'm not saying they don't, but not many people expected them to go into Baton Rouge and knock off the defending national champions 44-34. So we're going to take a deep dive into that game. Paul Jones with the Genes page with the Bulldogs 24/7 site is going to join us. Curtis Wilkerson is also going to jump in to talk some maybe a little bit of basketball recruiting, but we're really going to focus on this game as this is your Arkansas at Mississippi State primer. Before we get started, of course, I got to remind you there's plenty of ways to watch and listen. You can always tune in on Facebook Live. We finished 51 follows short of our goal of 80,000 before the season started. Very disappointing. Did not expect that, but we made a lot of progress. So if you haven't followed the page, go ahead and do so already. You'll get all of our free content flowing through on our Facebook page as well as whenever we run the show. So follow the page on Facebook Live. Also interact with the video. Share it with somebody you think might like it. Give us a thumbs up if you like the content as well. Also available on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notifications bell so you're notified anytime we upload new videos there. Also comment, interact, share. All those things helps the algorithm, helps boost our channel. Also available on Apple Podcasts. If you haven't thrown us that 5-star rating, please do so now or at the end of the show. If you're subscribed, just scroll down to the bottom of the page and you can leave the rating there. If you're not subscribed, subscribe, but before you do that, throw us a 5-star rating. We're almost at 500 reviews in there now, so would love to hit that. Also, say something nice if you like the show as well. Also available on Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere else you can think of to find your favorite podcast. Plenty of ways to get our free content. You can also sign up for our newsletter. Be sure to do that if you haven't done so already. We'll deliver free Razorback news to your email inbox every single morning, along with maybe a couple of VIP articles, but 75% of what we send is going to be free content on the Razorbacks. Also, you can sign up with text alerts. You can get free text alerts delivered. Anytime there's breaking news, we'll also send an email, but you'll also want to get the text alerts because that'll get there very quickly so you'll know before all your friends anytime there's breaking Razorback news. So we'll send that all via text alert. So a lot of ways to follow Hog Sports: Facebook, YouTube, newsletters, text alerts, podcast. A lot of different ways, but also the most important way is to sign up at HawgSports.com, and right now it's 30% off or just $1 for your first month. Okay. Appreciate y'all bearing with me on that. So Mississippi State goes into Baton Rouge and knocks off the defending national champions, ends their 16-game winning streak, 44-34. Now, there were a lot of things that went into that game. I mean, there were a few things that could have changed things drastically. I mean, there was kind of a tuck with KJ Costello near the end of the game where it was ruled a forward pass, but he was bringing it down, but his arm was going forward. It was close. But if that goes a different way, then, the outcome of the game could have been different. So there's so many things like that. I will say this, the first 5-6 tough passes that he completed, I was like, well, that was lucky. That was a lucky throw. You got lucky there. And then after a while of saying that, you're like, man, this guy's just dropping dimes. KJ Costello is a great fit for that offense. And, LSU, this doesn't take anything away from Mississippi State, but LSU lost a ton off of last year. You compare Arkansas, the team they faced in Georgia, who returned, 8 starters off of last year's defense, 14 players who played a lot. The only player that they really lost off last year's defense was Mr. Irrelevant, number 255 pick in the NFL draft, a linebacker, still very stout at linebacker, versus LSU, who lost almost everybody, like all but 3 starters. They had players opt out, some very key players. They had 13 or 14 players drafted in the NFL. It tied a record. You had like 3 or 4 players opt out. Derek Stingley, I think is how you say his name. Their best cornerback had to go to the hospital before the game. He was out for the game. So they lost. They had a lot impact. And of course, Brennan at quarterback, obviously a big drop-off from the Heisman Trophy winner last year, just in what we saw so far. And, they'll probably get better, but LSU always has great athletes, but that's a lot to replace. And Mississippi State absolutely took advantage. To come in, I don't care what LSU is replacing, they got talent. And to come in and throw for 623 yards, an SEC record in your first game as a quarterback in the SEC, as a coach in the SEC, against the defending national champions, that's very impressive. Very impressive. And a lot had to go right, but it did. I mean, kudos to Mississippi State. I mean, fantastic debut for Mike Leach. All right, for Arkansas, they had a few players missing in the game against Georgia. Nothing too dramatic, though. Nothing too dramatic. Jarquez McClellan, backup cornerback who started last year, was out. Devin Bush, who I believe has missed a lot of time in practice, but he was out for the game. Micah Smith, Miles Mason, Malik Chavis. These are all defensive backs. They're all backup defensive backs, but they're all defensive backs. So Arkansas is going to need all of those guys. I mean, when you consider a team that's going to throw maybe upwards of 60 times, they did against LSU. They called 65 pass plays total. They were sacked 5 times. You're going to need a lot of defensive backs to rotate in and out, and that's kind of what Simeon Blair, Monteric Brown were saying the other day about this matchup, making sure they stay fresh back there. As far as other injury stuff, you had a couple injuries to defensive ends during the game. Dorian Gerald looks like he had an ankle injury. He's questionable. He did not practice on Tuesday. Yeah, I believe that's the last time we talked to Pittman today, but he did not practice, and we'll see on that. Now, also, Julius Coates looked like maybe a shoulder, something around this area up here. So that's another concerning thing. That's your 2 starting defensive ends, and this is a team that's going to throw the ball 60 times. You need to be able to get some pressure on him. And we can talk about the defensive backs and the importance of getting all these guys back, but the reality of it is you got to get some pressure on him. I mean, no quarterback is going to look good when he's got people in his face. And Arkansas had a couple of sacks on Saturday. Dorian Gerald had 1.5. But you're going to get Matteo Soli back, who started, 11 games last year, 11 of the 12 games as a true freshman, mostly with a club on his hand. But you get him back. He was out last week. Zach Williams has done some good things. Eric Gregory is also a guy that they've really praised heavily in camp. Hopefully for Julius Coates, it's not a shoulder injury that's just going to nag him all season long. And maybe you get Dorian Gerald back. Those would all be really big things for Arkansas. And who knows how things shake out in the injury department, or the COVID-19 department. I mean, they got 3 tests they take this week. Anything could happen. Anything could happen. That's a big part of wins and losses for Arkansas, when you project like the things that have to happen, right? Special teams, penalties, turnovers, COVID. I mean, all those things have to play in Arkansas's favor in a lot of these games for them to win. But I think most of us were pleasantly surprised with the way that Arkansas came out against Georgia. Now, I didn't do a show on Monday. Kind of a weird deal for me. I've been kind of playing catch-up all week because, first of all, I haven't been sick a day in almost 6 years, going back to December of 2014. I've not been sick a day. So about 2 o'clock, I'm watching the game, 2 a.m. On Saturday. I'm rewatching the game on television and start feeling a little queasy. About 3:30, I kind of fought through about 3:30 because I also watched some of the Mississippi State and LSU game that night. I go to bed and I wake up still feeling queasy, vomit, and start getting chills and stuff. About 2 p.m., my wife takes my temperature. I took a nap. I don't take naps ever. I never take naps, but I had to go to sleep. My wife comes to take my temperature. It's 102. Next thing I know, I'm standing in line getting a COVID test, and the doctor doesn't think it's COVID, and I take a flu test. He didn't think I had the flu either. The only place I'd been last week was to get a drive-through flu shot, and I pick a pickup window at a Greek restaurant. That's the only interaction I had with anybody aside from my family last week, crazy as that is. So it was a busy week. Anyway, don't have COVID, obviously. Don't have the flu. Possibly may have had food poisoning. That's possible. Could have had an immune reaction to the flu shot. That's possible also. But don't have COVID. But anyway, I feel like I lost today. So we didn't have the show on Monday for a lot of the recap of everything that happened. So apologize for that. But got in the way of me. A little sickness. So hopefully things for Arkansas work out in the injury department and in the COVID department, I should say. Now, let's get to the main question, the main concern for Arkansas on that special teams. I mean, first of all, just looking at the defense, I think most of us have to be pleased with the way Arkansas's defense played for about 38 minutes or so in that game. And eventually, I mean, they were just going to give way because field position was terrible, even though they played so stout and only held Mississippi State to 5 points in the first half. Most of the time they were playing on their own end of the field, right? eventually something's going to give way. If the offense doesn't pick things up and make some big plays here and there, eventually things are going to give way. So, it wasn't all on the offense. The offense has a chance to improve because Georgia was super stout. We talked about, all the returners and all the players that they return, how stout they are up front on the defensive line. Mississippi State's got a good defense, but they're nothing like what Georgia was. Arkansas has a chance to get the ball rolling on the ground against these guys. They don't want to get into a shootout with Mississippi State. Everybody knows that. So need to get Rakeem Boyd going, those types of things. But let's talk about the special teams first of all, because they were just a travesty. When you consider all the time and effort they spent, they have a dedicated special teams coach. Now, Pittman did indicate, also you've got players in and out because of COVID. A guy may be in special teams, one day and out the next. You have all these kind of a musical chairs on an area that really you spend about 20 minutes of your 2-hour practice focusing on. Okay? Spend about 20 minutes of your 2-hour practice focusing on that. So I can see how that could get out of whack, and it's important, I think, for them to really – hey, what is it, buddy? This guy has something to say. What is it? What is it? Good boy. Hey, let me do the radio show. So that's our dog, Jerry Jack. He is 14 weeks old and is acting like he wants out. So we got a long show coming up here, so hopefully not. All right, so – special teams. Guys, I may have to take a break. What is it, buddy? I'm the only person here. I just took him out. You good? Hold on. I'm going to let him go real quick. Come on. All right. He's going to roam around the house, I guess, probably tear something up. Apologies. So, anyway, back to the special teams. I think when you look at it, they're going to spend extra time on it this week because they had so many issues with COVID and players moving in and out of the lineup and stuff. So I imagine they'll spend a little bit extra time and hopefully get things shored up. But still, there's some other things that, are just generally disappointing. I mean, they only had 10 guys out there on special teams. That's a problem. But, the punting obviously could have been better. George Caratan outkicked his coverage a couple of times. He had a 57-yarder. He had 3 over 50 yards, but he outkicked his coverage a couple of times. Kickoff return, they had a 43-yarder and a 48-yarder. One of them was off a line drive. I don't know if that was intentional or what, but the guy returned at 43 yards, Kenny McIntosh. So on the other side of the coin, Georgia was excellent. I mean, they were excellent. The Camarda kid, the punter, averaged almost 50 yards a punt, 5 of them inside the 20. I mean, he was checking punts up. He had a 63-yarder, 4 50-yard punts. I mean, he was really exceptional. I guess it's a good thing that Arkansas made him punt 7 times, though. And so, yeah, Arkansas also had a field goal make. Had an ill-timed timeout, but that's what you do. Well, you like to call the timeout before they kick it at all. But got to get special teams shored up. No question about that. All right. Before we jump into the rest of, Arkansas's offense versus the defense, and the defense versus the offense, I want to go to Paul Jones. We mentioned him a minute ago. He is the co-publisher at Gene's Page, the 24/7 site for Mississippi State. Does a great job covering the Bulldogs. So we'll see what he's got to say.
Hello.
Hey, Paul. Trey Biddy with HawgSports. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good.
So I was just giving a little bit of introduction on you guys and just kind of going over what has happened at Mississippi State in the past week with going down and knocking off the LSU Tigers. You saw that one coming, right?
Oh, yes, sir.
So what were your thoughts as that game was unfolding, and how did Mississippi State go down there and knock off LSU?
Probably the biggest takeaway I actually took, and I know this sounds crazy with all the offensive numbers they put up, but I had a good feeling they were going to put up some points just because that's Mike Leach's system, and that really didn't take me by surprise. It was probably the way the defense held up because, the final score was 44-34, but LSU got 17 points off of turnovers, and obviously that included a big 6 that KJ Costello threw. But You know, their starting 11 is pretty good on defense. There's a lot of inexperience on the back end and the secondary, and a big question mark is obviously keeping guys healthy because the defensive depth is very, very young and very inexperienced. So, to me, that's going to be the biggest thing to look at moving forward and keeping guys healthy. But, you know, KJ Costello did surprise me with his accuracy. I knew he could throw the football around, but, man, he had some basically just perfect throws to where his guy could catch it over the shoulder or in traffic. And, you know, that was another takeaway I took and something that surprised me.
So do you think that going into this one, you know, Mississippi State, obviously, you know, this is obviously a different coaching staff and everything, but do you think Colin Hill ran for 234 yards and 11 yards carry against Arkansas's defense last year. Do you think that Mississippi State will throw the ball 60 times in this one, or do you see something happening like where they maybe do deviate from what Leach does and run the ball a little bit more just because, I mean, of Colin Hill?
It's going to be a lot what Arkansas gives them, and I think that's what his whole offense is based on, is finding matchups in the passing game. You know, I think they ran the ball 16 times total against LSU, maybe a few more this weekend against Arkansas, but, you know, at the end of the day, he's still going to throw it 50 or 60 times, and that's just going to be what fans have to get used to seeing, and I know a lot of Mississippi State fans aren't used to that, and, you know, there was some eyebrows raised on 3rd and 1, and they're in the shotgun throwing the ball. You know, a lot of people are like, man, run the ball. I'm like, well, you might as well say that because you're going to see it a lot from Mike Leach. It doesn't matter if it's in the red zone or at midfield or in their own territory. You know, every down's going to be basically a passing down for this group.
I think that Mississippi State fans are probably going to be okay with as long as the outcome results in W's with Mike Leach. So I would ask, like, on special teams, because before I brought you on, I was talking about special teams play, and Arkansas really struggled in the opener. It was kind of a surprise because they brought Scott Fountain in from the University of Georgia, who's had a lot of success over there. But Arkansas just couldn't seem to get out of their own way on special teams. What was your take on Mississippi State, their overall special teams performance?
Very solid, and a lot of it had to do with Arizona State transfer Brandon Ruiz. I mean, he was basically perfect on kickoffs, put all of them in end zone for touchbacks except for one, and that one was returned about 8-9 yards deep out of the end zone. He was perfect on all his extra point field goal attempts. Punting was pretty solid. Probably the only negative they had in the kicking game was Austin Williams, his first time returning punts, and he fielded a couple of punts inside the 5 as a fair catch, whereas, you know, you'd probably want that to just roll into the end zone, but that was probably the only negative they had on special teams. And, of course, LSU did a good job on touchbacks as well, and I don't think Mississippi State had a single kickoff return in that game.
Paul Jones joining us from Gene's Page, co-publisher. You can follow him at PJ247Sports. On Twitter, and for the Mississippi State fan, the lonely Mississippi State fan maybe listening in Arkansas or somewhere, definitely go down there and check out Gene's Page, and they have a great site over there to turn out some really good content. So we talked about some of the keys in our 5 questions deal that we did earlier in the week. I was wondering if you could just kind of go over that, but basically what you had told us was, you know, defensive depth overall, and I guess I can't remember what your other key was on the offensive side of the ball, but just a couple of keys that you feel will be important aside from the obvious in this one.
Well, it's kind of, you know, Trey, this is going to be a key for every game, and it's going to be the offensive line holding up against pressure, because I think one way that defenses are going to try to slow down the air raid is trying to rush 3 or 4 guys and dropping the rest back in coverage. And then Mississippi State can hold down that pass rush and limit to the sacks and give KJ time to throw the football with those short routes. He doesn't need much time, but to me, that's probably one of the biggest keys is how the offensive line will hold up. And for the most part, considering they were having, you know, 3 first-year starters against LSU, they did a pretty good job against LSU. Of course, LSU's got some pretty good defensive ends that are going to bring pressure, and they knocked down some of KJ Costello's passes, but you know, I'd say that, and also just keeping guys healthy on defense and not having to go too deep on the roster when it comes to substitutes.
Seems like you guys, Mississippi State is pretty healthy overall. Scott Lashley, I think you'd mentioned, was out for the season, a backup offensive lineman. Greg Island, Mark Emerson, Aaron Brule, backup quarterback Will Rogers. I mean, whether it's COVID or injuries and stuff. Right now, where is Mississippi State in terms of injuries, or based on what you're hearing? Or COVID?
I believe they're pretty good. All of those guys except for Island came back and played against LSU after getting banged up, and so far that we've heard this one, none of those guys are expected to miss Saturday's game. I believe Scott Lashley is the only one on that two deep that's out, of course. Trey, in these strange days, you never know who's going to test positive for COVID. And they had that situation late last week. I think Will Rogers, freshman quarterback, he's the backup to Costello. He tested positive and was not able to make the trip to LSU. And, of course, can't really nail down what day he tested positive because you know how quiet that stuff is kept in-house. But depending on that day that he tested positive, I believe it's 10 days that they have to quarantine and not be able to be around the team. So I guess if he did test positive last Thursday, then he may as well, but he may be out too against Arkansas.
All right, Paul, I'll get you out with this. Just your prediction on the outcome of this game, score prediction if you want to give one.
I think both teams are going to put up points, and I could see a game in the 40s and 30s. I think I went with Mississippi State 47, Arkansas 34, 35, something like that. Because I think both offenses are going to have some success on Saturday, and I think this is going to be the weirdest year too because I think it's going to be hard to judge each SEC team from week to week. I think it's a mistake to do that in this season because anything can happen during a normal season, but very much so in a season like this where you don't know what to expect.
Yep. All right, Paul. Well, I appreciate you joining us, man.
Anytime, Trey.
All right. See you later, Paul. All right, that's Paul Jones, again, with Gene's Page, the 24/7 site dedicated to the Mississippi State Bulldogs. You can follow him on Twitter at PJ247Sports. Does a great job. All right. Let's go straight to Curtis Wilkerson. Wilkerson kind of focused a little bit on the Mississippi State defense, and I'll go into some stuff on the Mississippi State offense a little bit more, just based on kind of the matchups of how things could shake out. For those who don't follow Curtis, you can follow him at Kurt Wilkerson on Twitter, Kurt Wilkerson _ and he's been with us for a few months now. Does a great job. What's up, Kurt?
Hey, Trey, what's going on?
Oh, not much. I was just talking to Paul Jones over at the 24/7 site for Mississippi State. They do a great job over there, just kind of running down some things. But I thought I would pick your brain a little bit. We kind of flipped the script a little bit this week where you kind of focus more on Arkansas's offense versus Mississippi State's defense. We flipped it around the other day, but we can jump right into it if you want to. I would just, we kind of break it up into different categories. But so I was curious what your thoughts are on Arkansas's defensive line versus what Mississippi State has up front.
Yeah, we saw a couple good things in that Georgia game last week.
Excuse me, I flipped it around on you, didn't I?
Yeah, I caught you. You threw me off for a second, but I know what you were trying to say.
So Mississippi State's defensive line versus Arkansas's offensive front.
Yeah, so, taking a look at that Mississippi State defensive front, it's a little bit different than what we saw from Georgia, who was just absolutely enormous from a size and physicality standpoint. Mississippi State is good up front. They came up with 7 sacks against LSU. Some of that, I think, was coverage related, but they operate a little bit differently. They move a lot more than you saw out of Georgia up front, a lot of twists, a lot of stunts, and things like that take a little bit more time to develop. But Arkansas had some problems on that offensive line with communication and some pre-snap things. That communication is going to have to be a lot better with all the movement that Mississippi State has up front. They've got some nice pieces up there. If you take a look at it, Kobe Jones, Marquise Spencer are two guys that really stood out to me on that Mississippi State defensive line that Arkansas is going to have to key on. I do think Rakeem Boyd is going to have some better lanes to run through than he did against Georgia when they were practically, non-existent there. LSU, their numbers don't look great from a rushing standpoint, but you have to keep in mind the yards that they lost from those sacks from Miles Brennan. And then they got behind, and against an air raid offense like Mississippi State, if you're playing behind by a touchdown or so, that's one thing. But once you get down by a couple scores, you start to panic a little bit because you know how quick they can strike, and LSU kind of abandoned the run there towards the latter half of that game.
Curtis Wilkerson joining us with HawgSports.com. So with Rakeem, obviously not the game that he wanted. I don't think he had but 11 carries, maybe 21 yards or something. Not necessarily what you would have expected, even against Georgia's very stout defense. I think some people thought at least, get 50, maybe 75 yards against those guys. But it was like celebrating a touchdown if you got 3 yards on first down against them. So as you were kind of saying, maybe a better opportunity. What do you think is going to happen? I don't think you want to get into a shootout, obviously, with Mississippi State. So I could see maybe as many as 30 touches for Rakeem Boyd if they can find some running lanes.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think one of the bigger keys to the game is to be able to just sustain some longer drives offensively, even if you don't score, but to get a few first downs, run some time off of that clock, and then hopefully, you just keep that air raid off of the field a little bit and keep your defense with their legs underneath them because they certainly ran out of gas there late. With Boyd, I do think he's going to have a much better game, and I agree. This might be a game where he gets 20-plus touches out of the backfield, and I'd like to see him mix Traylon Smith in there a little bit. I thought, that they struggled in the run game, but Smith showed some burst there. He's about as quick and electric as we thought he was, and I think they could be a nice 1-2 combination. I'd like to see him get maybe, 8 to 10 touches of his own.
I think that also we didn't see any of this last week, but you could also see some Wildcat this week with Traylon Burks, which would also contribute to the running game. If they could get that going, that would be nice. And it would be nice to see it more like not just something that they run 1 or 2 plays, like 7 plays, maybe even 8. Just, obviously that would, depend on whether or not it's working. You don't want to just run it. If you run it twice and you don't pick up any yardage, you probably won't ever see it again. So that's another way that they could possibly pick up yards on the ground. But with that, with Traylon Burks and, obviously a lot of success, 7 catches, 102 yards and a touchdown against Georgia. What do you see out of Arkansas moving forward in the passing game, and how can they build on what they did against Georgia, which was far from spectacular, but there were a couple of moments at least?
Yeah, I think that's going to be better. I think I'm in the camp of being really encouraged by what I saw from Felipe Franks and the passing attack. You look at it, and on the surface, he was just over 50% completion percentage, and that's not great. Had a couple of interceptions there, and obviously those are things that you want to see cleaned up, and I think with more repetition and some better chemistry and communication, those are things that are going to improve. But you take a look at his 2 starts against Georgia when he was at Florida, and he threw for a combined 130 yards. Well, he walked out there and threw for 200 with a new team at Arkansas, a new team, new coaches, new offensive coordinators.
Good point.
So,
yeah.
I think he did better maybe than people are giving him credit for there. That's what you're going to get with Felipe Franks. He's going to show flashes of that big playability. We saw the 49-yard touchdown pass to Burks. And he's going to take some chances and make some mistakes. That's who he's been. So you got to live with the good and the bad. But Mississippi State secondary, they made some plays. They had a couple interceptions in that game. But they're not quite of the caliber of Georgia. They're young. I think Arkansas has the weapons to exploit them a little bit. I expect Franks to have a pretty solid game against Mississippi State. I do think the offense is going to perform quite a bit better than they did last week.
Kurt, I know you're dying to pick Arkansas to win this game. Are you going to do it? How do you see it playing out?
A wise man said on a walk and talk recently that Arkansas might be in a position where they lose a couple tough ones as they're trying to learn how to win, and that's kind of how I see this going. Coming into the season, I actually picked this as a 3-point loss for Arkansas. I kind of had the same thought. On the road, maybe the first game where they really get out and compete for 4 quarters, but we've had so many heartbreaks. If you think about Kentucky last year, Texas A&M, some games like that. It takes a little bit to get over that hump, but it only takes one game for you to do it. But I could see this being a game where Arkansas really competes for 4 quarters. I think they're going to have themselves in a position, but I do have them coming up short. I think I picked my final score 37-31 Mississippi State. I think it's going to be a good ball game, though.
Yeah, I agree with you in a lot of ways, Curtis. I mean, a lot of times with new teams, I should say, you kind of got to learn the hard way how to take it on the road and come out with a win. So I didn't predict it in the preseason, and I don't think I'm going to predict it in this one. Having said that, Arkansas is going to have a chance to win, I think, if they get a couple of things accomplished in short special teams. So, all right, Curtis, you want to drop any basketball recruiting nugget or anything? You got anything like that to drop?
Not a lot has changed over the course of the past week. I'd say for that 2021 class, continue to keep an eye on really the key 4. You've got 4-star forward Alex Fudge. Arkansas is in the top 10 there, so still a little bit of time to go. We know about Trey Alexander. I do think Arkansas is in a good position there. Maybe not the leader, but they're certainly not out of it. I think they've got a heck of a puncher's chance in Landon Alexander. Jonathan Lawson, 6'4", out of Memphis. That's one to keep an eye on. He has an announcement date. I believe it's October 7th. He's got Arkansas in his final 5. Memphis, Oregon, other teams to watch there. So we'll have some news on that over the course of the next week. Those are probably the nuggets out of that 2021 class right now. After we see what Lawson decides, there'll be a little bit more clarity in what they're going to try to do moving forward.
All right, Kurt. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for joining us.
Always.
All
Anytime.
right.
Hey, Trey, I tell you what, man, if you ever need anybody to babysit Jerry Jack, a dog sitter, you just say the word. I'll come over. I'll take him for a nice walk.
Okay. All right, man. We might have to do that next show. He's like chewing at my leg right now.
I love it. Have a good one, Trey.
What? All right, man. Thanks, Kurt.
All right, I'll see it.
All right. That's Curtis Wilkerson again. Curtis does a fantastic job. HawgSports.com. Does a lot of great stuff as far as basketball recruiting goes, and of course covering all 3 major sports. And he'll be a big asset when basketball comes around. I think you'll see that. What is that? November 25th, I think they decided. So, changing gears a little bit, let's take a look at Mississippi State's offense and how it matches up against Arkansas's defense. And in the passing game, obviously, I don't know how many times we've said. KJ Costello was 36 of 60 passing for 623 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, which is key. For Arkansas's defensive backs, they're going to have to catch the balls that are thrown to them. If a quarterback throws 60 times, eventually he's going to get some pressure here. He's going to make some bad decisions. Even for a guy this experienced, he's going to put some balls in jeopardy here and there, throwing the ball that many times. So catch the ones that are thrown to you. If the ball gets put on the ground, you got to recover it. Mississippi State, I should say Mike Leach, in his history as a coach, turnover margin hasn't been a huge indicator of success for him. He's been minus or plus in the turnover department. It hadn't mattered a whole lot. But I did mention, earlier that there was a late almost fumble that could have really changed the outcome of that game for LSU, but it was ruled a forward pass. It was like this. It was like he was trying to bring it back, but the ball went forward just enough. Might have been different in the NFL. I don't know. It was a tuck rule, I guess, different. Maybe somebody can comment on that. But passing game is going to be huge, and it's not just Osiris Mitchell and Javonte Payton. They had, 3 guys have over 100 receiving yards, and Mitchell had 7 for 183 and 2 touchdowns. But you also had Kylan Hill, out of the backfield, 8 catches, 158 yards. Only had 7 carries for 34 yards, but 8 catches for 158 yards and a touchdown, including a 75-yarder. On that 75-yarder, he slipped a big tackle, but there were players jogging. There were players on LSU jogging, which to me is a horrible sign. That's flashbacks to last year. It's one of the things that I think as a Razorback fan you should be most proud of with the defense is they never did that. They were always swarming to the ball. LSU, I see a guy just jogging. Oh, he's got it. You can't do that against Kylan Hill. He breaks a tackle, boom, he's gone 75 yards for a touchdown, and it's only because you loafed. That's the reason. It could have been a good gain, but it wouldn't have been a 75-yard touchdown without the loafing. So can't do that. Cannot assume that anybody's got it. That comes down to coaching and just hammering, preaching that in. So to me, that's on Bo Pelini a lot. Which another thing, LSU lost offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. They only returned 3 guys as starters out of 22. That's a lot. Well, I guess less than that because they also lost the cornerback. So Colin Hill, is he going to run the ball more or is he not? I mean, Mississippi State only ran the ball 16 times and 5 of them were sacks. So really only 11 rushing plays for Mississippi State. But obviously, Colin Hill ran for 242 times for 1,350 yards, 5.6 yards per carry with 10 touchdowns last year. And he came back to play in this offense under Mike Leach because Mike Leach basically told him he'd get 2,000 yards of total offense. Most of it may be in the passing game, but I could see them definitely running the ball against Arkansas or trying to run. Now, I think Arkansas played pretty stout overall. But, dude, stop. Killing me, Jerry Jack. My daughter named him Jerry Jack, by the way. It's a good name. Good name for a dog. So, anyway, that's kind of where things are. Defensive line for Arkansas versus Mississippi State offensive line. Obviously, Mississippi State is very big on the offensive line. I mean, they're, 6'5" and a half, 320 pounds across the board. Some older players, obviously. Greg Island was dinged up in the opener, as we mentioned, but return status is unknown. Cole Smith at center is a transfer actually from LSU, who played a good game overall. Darian Parker, it goes 6'4", 355 at the right guard spot. Charles Cross, he's the lightest guy of the bunch, 6'5", 290, but he was a 5-star recruit in the class of 2019. I guess he's also the youngest guy. And Quatravius Johnson goes 6'7", 315. He was a 4-star. So the 3 interior guys were actually, mid-range, 3-star type recruits, for those interested in that kind of stuff. And the tackles were a 4-star and a 5-star. So that could be a really interesting matchup for Arkansas. Is Julius Coates 100%? Is Dorian Gerald going to even be able to play? Versus, 2 guys that were very highly regarded. And Arkansas has that too. I mean, Zach Williams, who's a sophomore, Eric Gregory, who's a redshirt freshman, and Matteo Soli, who's a sophomore. They were all 4-star recruits also. They were all very highly regarded players. But it'd be nice to get Julius Coates, Dorian Gerald back, obviously. So that's kind of where things stand. I think we can probably shift into some questions now. So first, before we go into questions, I want to remind everybody there's plenty of ways to watch and listen. Again, you're probably watching on one of those channels right now, but you can tune in on Facebook Live. If you haven't thrown us that thumbs up, do so now. You can also tune in on YouTube. Follow the page on Facebook, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and hit the notifications bell so you're notified anytime we upload new videos. Interact, share, follow, comment, like. All of those things help the algorithm, help boost our channel. Also available on Apple Podcasts. Throw us that 5-star rating if you haven't done so already. Get us to 500 ratings, and throw us a review if you want to, if you like the content as well. Also share that with somebody you think might like it, and available anywhere else you can think of to find your favorite podcast. 30% off right now at HawgSports.com, or just $1 for your first month. Our free email newsletter will deliver daily Razorback news to you for free in your email inbox, and also anytime there's breaking news, we'll send that. And we'll also send you a text alert if you want. If you want to get a text alert with a link to further information, then sign up for our free text alerts at HawgSports.com. You can just go to the top right. I think it's under Key HawgSports links there. There's the 3 dots or the 3 lines, depending on if you're mobile or on desktop, and you click on that and you can see where to sign up for a newsletter and text alerts. It takes 15 seconds to do either one of those. But with the newsletter, you actually get an activation email, so you do have an extra step there. So check us out. Plenty of ways to do it. You can also just go to HawgSports.com and access our information there. Check out the legendary Razor's Edge VIP message board. All right, let's get to the questions now. I don't think I have them brought up. So we're going to go to HawgSports.com and see if we got any questions here. I kind of posted it a little bit late. TexHog817 says, based on the way our D played Georgia and the effectiveness of the defensive backs early in the game, do you believe that Arkansas can at least slow down the air raid, then use Boyd in the running game to control the clock? Hope you don't freeze again. I guess I froze earlier. So I will say That's got to be the goal for Arkansas. You don't want to get into a shootout with them. I do think that they can have some more success running the ball. I mean, you make a big improvement from game 1 to game 2. For Arkansas, hopefully that's not the case with Mississippi State because they played lights out against the defending national champions. But I do think against the front that they have a better chance at running the ball. And if you can run the ball, then you should run the ball a lot because you don't want to get involved in that shootout. So shorten the game, run Rakeem Boyd, still throw the ball, don't stop, doing that kind of stuff. So Scotty Through Shade said, will Felipe Franks have a better game this week? I believe that he will. I think that we'll probably come out of this game going, man, the defense took a step back. What happened? But the offense looked better at least. To me, the main thing that we need to be saying is, wow, the special teams made a huge improvement from week 1 to week 2. That needs to be what we're saying. And, of course, the offense. And we're probably going to be saying that about the offense. They made a big improvement. The defense didn't. That has to do with the matchups. Houston Nutburner says, has anyone spoken to Kendall? How is he doing? Nobody's spoken to Kendall. We don't get coordinators. I don't know if it's because COVID or what. But, in the past we've always got a chance to speak to coordinators once a week. But we haven't had that since the season started. MC Hogger says Mississippi State has some very lengthy receivers. I believe they have 2 6'5 plus. And that being said, how do we make a game plan to match up against them when our secondary is not on the taller side? Secondary is not terribly short. I mean, Monteric Brown's long, lanky, 6 foot. Jerry Jacobs, I guess, is a little bit shorter, but he's a pretty physical guy. In the secondary, obviously you're going to get a lot of guys back. Jalen Catalon, he's probably, on the shorter side, about 5'10". Played a really good game on Saturday. And then you get Joe Fouché back. But, I mean, you're just going to run into that. I mean, that's just kind of the way things are. You don't see many defensive backs that go over 6'2", period, and especially not at cornerback, usually not any taller than 6 foot. I mean, it happens, obviously, but usually not. So you're just going to have – I mean, the thing with Costello, if he's on, then he's going to be on and they're going to make plays. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line there. So you just got to make sure that you play tough and you seal them off when you can. You don't get caught up in traffic because they are going to try to, screen you. They'll run guys this way and that way. I mean, create some natural screen. So you got to make sure you fight through some of that stuff. That's going to be a bigger deal than anything. But catch the balls that are thrown to you. They're gonna rack up passing yards. They're gonna make completions, and they're gonna throw for 300 plus yards on Arkansas secondary. I would be surprised if that didn't happen with the amount of balls that they're going to throw. The trick for Arkansas has got to be catch the balls that are thrown to you. Get some pressure on the quarterback, make him make some mistakes. He's shown he'll make a mistake here and there. He's not going to be perfect, especially not throwing that many times. You've got to catch the ones that are thrown to you. It's got to be a big emphasis in practice this week. Warrior Hog 23 says, if the run game struggles early, do we go packages with either KJ or Malik and run the zone or power read some? I don't think the run game is going to struggle really bad early, but they can do that stuff if they wanted with Felipe Franks, and I kind of think that they would. I hope that's not the course that they choose to go. The run game struggling, so we're going to bring in backup quarterbacks. I hope that wouldn't be something that they would think to do. Now, packages or something, okay. But, yeah, I hope that doesn't happen. Gibby6996 says, I know that Mississippi State defense is not as stout as Georgia, so how well do you think we can move the ball against this defense? Like I said, I mean, I think that we'll leave this game going. Arkansas's offense improved now. It may end up being a situation you get down to it and Arkansas didn't have what it takes to finish, didn't know how to finish a game, something like that. They could absolutely play a big role. I mean, Mississippi State can score in a hurry just because you have maybe, even if Arkansas has a 14-point lead or something, that, even with 5 minutes left, you wouldn't think that game's over. Sparks Co. says, if Odom takes a head coaching job following the season, do any DCs come in mind that would make sense as a play? I mean, I haven't even considered that. I haven't even begun to think about that, but Odom had a pretty nice debut for Arkansas. I think that for Odom, he would have to get another, Power 5 type of job for him to leave Arkansas. I believe that he was offered the Memphis job. I believe he was their choice and turned it down. We know that he was offered a head coaching job. Ben Strassi says, out of the DBs we have back this week, which ones have the potential to be as explosive as Jalen Catalon? I'm still amazed at what none of them. Catalon, the best defensive backs on the team, in my opinion, are Jalen Catalon, Monteric Brown, and Jerry Jacobs. Some of that's just based off of obviously one game, especially with Jerry Jacobs, and we've seen more of Jalen Catalon. But those three guys, and then I don't want to say everybody else, but Joe Fouché probably on that next tier for me. But Fouché played with a shoulder injury all last year and was kind of given a hard time by Razorback fans, and I think that plagued him a lot. So maybe he comes back and shows a lot better this season. But none of these guys had the potential to be as explosive and as good a player, I don't think, as Catalon is. All right, everybody. That's our VIP questions. We still got some time. How long we got left here? Well, we've gone over time, but we're going to go over here. We're going to see what our Facebook users, if there's any questions here. A lot of comments. Jonathan Mosley says, if you could pinpoint a variable, what does the offense need to fix in order to not be stagnant like last week? The opponent, largely. I mean, a lot of the reason Arkansas's offense couldn't get going was because of Georgia. A lot of it's just the opponent. So, I mean, obviously, when you get pressure in your face, you'd like to see Felipe Franks maybe – it's hard to say, like, step into the pocket when somebody's right there in front of you, right? But he did have a couple of errant throws. A lot of people like the walk and talk. I appreciate everybody tuning into the walk and talk. I know everybody was looking forward to me, like, maybe getting pissed off or something, but you can't get mad at playing the number 4 team in the country after where Arkansas has been and the progress that they show for 38 minutes. I can't get mad at that, okay? I'm not going to, manufacture anger just to appease people in the walk and talk. I'm going to go off how I feel, and I felt the way I felt. So now, obviously, this week I'm not traveling to Mississippi State. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons surrounding that with everything going on in college football, and I can't even go to a post-game press conference. That's one of the big reasons that we travel for games is, to be able to ask the questions and sit in the post-game press conference room. But so I'm not going to Starkville for this one. I'll be watching from home. So I guess I'll just do the studio show after the game. I guess I could just walk around the neighborhood. My neighbors may think, what in the hell is he doing? I guess I could do that. Maybe I will. Let me know in the comments if you want me to walk and talk around the neighborhood after the game. I mean, I think the idea is, leaving the stadium, but if everybody wants me to, I guess I would. It might be dark. It'd be late. Somebody might call the cops on me. Walking around the neighborhood with a selfie stick, talking out loud. That might not be a good idea. Never mind. Scratch that. I can see that going very poorly. I'm going to have to do it in the studio or walking around the house. Rob McCallie says we should run a few double reverses and put Boyd up the middle. Yeah, maybe not at the 5-yard line. Corey Criswell says, do you think the scheme will be to put extra pressure on the quarterback or put extra coverage in the backfield? I mean, they always say with an experienced quarterback, you play more coverage. With an inexperienced, you rush him more. But I still think that they're going to come after him. I think you got to. I think you got to try to. You got to accept that they're going to put up passing yards. You just got to try to make them make 3, 4, 5 really bad throws that you can pick off or tip or something. Cedric White says talent doesn't always equate to playing well. Experience also plays an important role. Yes, coaching, obviously, too. I mean, we see plenty of teams across the country that recruit at an elite level. Texas, that don't play very well on Saturday. Now, Texas is for years and years and years out-recruited everybody in the state. But, I mean, and they're better now, obviously. But should they be in a nail-biter against Texas Tech based on talent? No, they obviously shouldn't. So a lot more goes into it. And we see teams year in and year out that they're not recruiting on the same level as some other teams, but they repeatedly produce good teams. The secret to being a fantastic team is to first win with good talent before you win with great talent. That's always been my thoughts on it. So win with good talent, start recruiting at a higher level. Look at Clemson. Clemson recruits at an elite level now, but they weren't doing that when they first got going. They had a fantastic player in Deshaun Watson who really helped kick things off to another level. Now, they'd always recruited well, but they weren't recruiting 1, 2, 3, recruiting classes in the country like they are now. So, and, Chad Morris kind of had a good point talking about being a regional recruiting team. I really think that Chad and his staff got it when it came to recruiting and how to recruit and, the approach that they have to take. And, blueprinted that, the only thing in the blueprint that worked from Clemson. Clemson used to recruit regionally, and now they recruit nationally. I mean, last year they got one of the top quarterback prospects in the country from California, the opposite end of the country. Jonathan Moses said, if our defense could play that well for 38 minutes against Georgia, what are they capable of doing if they are rationed correctly? Possibly, and not always backed up to their own end. Now, Georgia was playing with a redshirt freshman quarterback who'd never started I don't guess he'd ever played a college game. So things were – I'm not taking anything away from Arkansas's defense, but things were dramatically different when they brought in Stetson Bennett, the fourth. When they brought him in and he was distributing the ball, I mean, totally different outcome. Quarterback matters so much, people. I mean, isn't that obvious? I mean, if they'd had Burrow at LSU, they would have beaten Mississippi State on Saturday. Simple. Even with losing everything else. Quarterback, I mean, it's the most important position on the field. It's not even close. But if you can't protect him, then he's never going to look that good. Even Joe Burrow wouldn't look good without a lot of protection. Jason Sublet comment. A lot of comments. Jonathan Mosley says, will Sam Pittman be able to put a line together similar to the one they had under Bielema? That one was bigger than any line in college and the NFL. I mean, I thought they had a pretty good recruiting effort last year. I mean, it's been a while since they've gotten a 4-star offensive line. Well, I guess Ricky Stromberg, he was a late 4-star. But, I mean, Marcus Henderson was a big-time recruit that they got. The other two guys, Ray Curry and Jalen St. John, were both very highly regarded. It may take a minute. I mean, they're recruiting against 2-10. Let's not forget that. They're recruiting against 2-10. But I think eventually it's possible that they could get to that level again. It may not be as quick. I mean, obviously they got Denver Kirkland right out of the bat, right out of the gate. But they did get Marcus Henderson, and they got Dan Skipper right out of the gate. Some of the guys that they brought in that were very highly regarded didn't really, Reed Kohler didn't really pan out. Jalen Merrick didn't have, he had some injury issues also, and didn't really pan out. Frank Ragnow did, but he wasn't a 4-star. He was a guy that was kind of like viewed as Ricky Stromberg, a guy that had growth potential. So it's more than just getting 4 or 5-star guys, I guess. Kevin Brandt says time for the Hogs to earn some respect back if they can just fight hard enough. A lot of comments. Bobby Dale says, I don't see a win. The same old Razorbacks showed up in the second half, and Bennett looks so comfortable carving them up the middle of the field over and over. Well, I think they were a little exhausted, Bobby, but I mean, you could be right too. I mean, it's just one game, one samples. I mean, so we don't have a big sample size obviously to judge, but it's hard for me to take much away from Arkansas given the way that they played. I mean, they only gave up 2.7 yards per carry against Georgia, which is pretty solid considering last year all season they averaged, I think they gave up 5.5 yards a carry, which is the worst in the SEC. They gave up the worst average, the worst number of carries, the worst rushing yardage. Everything that Arkansas did in the rushing game in every major statistic last year was the worst in the SEC. So credit them. I mean, it's not like Zaire White was chopped liver. The guy was the number 1 ranked running back prospect in the country in 2018. Cedric White says, MSU loved the middle. Do you think we have to cheat a safety lower to cover the middle, more pushing the linebacker, more to the flats? Possible. I mean, you worry about Mississippi State with just, all the rubs or screens. You got to worry about that, and they're gonna. I mean, they were literally. It'll just be like this. These guys and these guys. Just crossing over each other. People get hung up in traffic. This could be a really big game for Jalen Catalon. I think we're going to see a lot of the 3-2-6. I think we'll see a good bit of that. You kind of have to, and they're going to go 4 wide, the majority of the time, and then you have Kylan Hill coming out of the backfield. Kevin Brandt says nickel and dime them down the field. Try to keep their offense off the field as long as possible. Yeah, I mean, you can say nickel and dime or just focus on the run game. I mean, you got 2 backs, I think, that are capable there. A lot of people appreciate the walk and talk. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Appreciate you guys tuning in to this show, making it so popular. Steve Welton says, "Hey, Trey, it was nice to see you. Do you walk and talk?" Another one without almost crying. Yeah, there were some moments. People want to see the walk and talk. I can't do it around the neighborhood. I mean, first of all, the game starts at 6:30, SEC Network alternate at 6:30. So it's going to go 3.5 hours at least, So, I mean, that's 10 o'clock. And then I got to transcribe press conference, write a story after the game, organize everything. I don't think at the volume that I would be talking, walking around the neighborhood with a selfie stick, talking into the camera, I just can't do it. I don't live out in the country or something, so I just don't think it would work. Mark G. Ward says, yes, walk and talk. I'll be up in Fayetteville this weekend. I can move around with various locations, say what's up. Greg Thompson says, I was fairly impressed with Buster. Your thoughts? Yes, Buster Brown is a guy that I've been saying for a while. I think he has next level ability. I was glad to see him play well on Saturday. Needs to get some interceptions. Needs to get the ones that are thrown to him, and that's kind of what we've been saying the whole time. All right, everybody. I think we did the show today. I think we got you primed up pretty good. We covered just about every category I can think of, from everything on Mississippi State's offense, defense, special teams, Arkansas the same way. Talked to Paul Jones from Gene's page, the Mississippi State site, with some great insight on the Bulldogs. Curtis Wilkerson had some great insight also on the Mississippi State defense. So that's it. Yeah, I think we did it. 6:30 p.m., SEC Network channel alternate. Arkansas's got a shot at this one. I'm not predicting them to win. I think probably something like 41-31 Mississippi State. Again, I wonder, I could see Arkansas getting close to the end of the game, maybe even having a lead, but not quite knowing what it takes to finish out a game. It's a learning experience for a lot of teams, like Curtis was saying earlier. Kind of stole my thunder on that opinion, but a lot of times new teams have to learn how to win on the road in the SEC, and this is an Arkansas team that hasn't figured out how to win at home yet. So maybe not this week, maybe not next week at Auburn, although that could be a very intriguing one considering all the emotion involved in that one with Chad Morris being on the other side. But then there's Ole Miss coming to Fayetteville after that. So maybe everything that they combine and learn from. I'm not counting them out against Mississippi State. Don't get me wrong. I'm not counting them out at all. They have a chance at winning this game, believe it or not. But I really look at that Ole Miss game maybe as a strongest opportunity for Arkansas to get a win. All right, everybody. For Paul Jones, for Curtis Wilkerson, I want to thank you for your questions. People on the Razor's Edge Premium Forum at HawgSports.com, and you people on Facebook as well. And sign up at HawgSports if you hadn't done so already. You'll be glad you did. A lot of great VIP information, especially when it comes to recruiting stuff that Curtis and Danny West deliver, and some of our inside information on the Razorbacks. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This has been Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com for your Arkansas at Mississippi State primer, and we'll catch you next time.